Hello! Welcome to A Witch's Yarn, a mystical book club led by your host, Esther Dawn. In this podcast, we explore questions about the world of witchcraft and paganism through reading and research. Each episode, we read and discuss a multitude of topics, from deity worship to spellcraft. So grab a cozy beverage, get settled in your favorite chair, pick up your craft of choice, and join me as I tell you a witch's yarn. Hello again, and welcome to the Witch's Yarn podcast. I am Esther Dawn. I'm your host. I am so excited to have you here with me again today. Today we will be discussing Thor through the Morrigan. So it's a really fun group of people. There is one very long interview in the middle of this. It is Jesus. Fair warning before we even get started that this is a trigger warning. Bless you. There is a trigger warning for this episode. If you have religious trauma, it does discuss one of the big three in Christianity. Additionally, it does talk about things like the Holocaust. So if that makes you uncomfortable or creates a visceral reaction for you, please feel free to skip ahead or just skip this episode. I totally understand. Now, with that being said, today, let me find my notes, because you know I love my notes. My cozy drink, I don't actually have one up here, so I might have to pause in the middle of this to go get a drink. My craft of the week, I just got my loom for my birthday a week early. My birthday is actually going to be the Tuesday, April 1st, so not this release date, but the next release date. Fun for me, it is spring break here, so since I'm a teacher, that means that I don't have to work this week, which means I'm recording this on a Monday at 10:41, and I don't have to worry about children or any of that fun stuff. But yeah, so today that's what we're doing. If you hear hammering or cats in the background, I apologize. Cats are still getting used to each other. Wyvern officially became Wyvern Dawn as of this Friday. He is our baby. We're keeping him. And our neighbor, we just got a new neighbor, and they are totally gutting and renovating their house. So there's lots of hammering and that kind of stuff going on. So I apologize in advance for the quality of the sound today. All right. So next week, there may actually be a possible delay just because of the fact that I am going out of town for early birthday / a date with my husband over spring break. So, hi, Chai. So, yeah, there might be a delay in next week's episode. I promise I will try to get an episode out next week, but it might be Wednesday or Thursday before it happens. All right, so let's just get started. I'm going to start with Thor. So Thor is a super interesting character, and if you're anything like me, the first person you think of when you think of Thor is Chris Hemsworth. That might just be me being a nerd and thinking Chris Hemsworth is nearly as pretty as Tom Hiddleston, but yeah, so I always think of Chris Hemsworth, but we have to remember that the character that Marvel portrays is not really anything like the actual Thor. So we should definitely not just, oh my gosh, she's on the table. But yeah, so we need to make sure that he's not just a god of thunder, he's not just some guy, he's also the god of agriculture and everyday people, which I did not know that. So, learning something new every day, because I'm not a Norse practitioner. And that's why I'm doing this series, is because I want to learn more about other people's, like, religions, so I don't step on toes and things like that. And also just because I think it's fun and I like learning new things. All right, so the first question that she asked Thor was, would you have wanted a longer handle on Mjolnir? So the story is that Mjolnir was being forged, and Loki played a trick, and so the handle ended up coming up short. And so she was, does that upset you? And she's just like, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. I can't change it. So why wish? So I think I hear Wyvern. He's very silly. All right. Number 2, what does strength mean to you as a warrior god? Strength has its limits, and we need to rest. We have to know when we reach our limits. He basically says, strength isn't infinite. Like, you have a certain amount of strength, and then oh my gosh, that cat. And then you need to take a break. It's finite. You have to oh dear. You have to continue to feed that strength through diet, exercise, rest. Mental strength as well as physical strength. Like, you can't just constantly be going, I tell that to myself. There's lots of gods in this particular episode that tell people to relax. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry. Number 3, what do you think about Loki being depicted as evil? And I love this because Loki actually pops up in this, which happens a lot in her interviews. I just want to make clear that I realize that this is her UPG. Like, I have no way to confirm, but I'm going just based on the fact that, I trust her as someone who I admire, like, outside of her authorship, as someone who does serious research and who has learned to be respectful of deities and things like that. So I do realize it's a UPG. For those of you who don't know, it's unverified personal gnosis, I believe. But I'm just saying that she's not, like, it's not scientific. She can't go and test this with equipment that she's getting these responses. Like, it's witchcraft. A lot of it is faith. And I don't mean that in the, like, Christian way. It's faith. You have to trust in yourself and what you're reading and what you're seeing. Oh gosh, Wyvern. He's got a toy that he, like, pulled apart, and he's carrying it around, and it's making loud noises. So I'm gonna try to ignore it from now on, but that's what you're hearing. So Loki comes in for this, and she says she feels Loki's presence, and he's not a fan of being portrayed as evil. I think I discussed this like episode 2, where our version of good and evil doesn't apply. Like, the Christian, I should say Christian version of good and evil doesn't apply. We've got these sources, but even the Eddas that we get most of our information from with the Norse pantheon were written by Christian monks. So you have to take them with a grain of salt. Like, you have to realize, well, they needed some sort of bad guy figure to be able to So the way it worked, and I think I might have mentioned this before too, is that in different countries, they tried different things to try to convert people to Christianity. And some, they said, oh, they're just fairy tales. And others, they said, they're folk heroes. In the Norse area, it seems what they did was they said, well, the gods were real, but Ragnarok has already happened. And the man and woman who went into Yggdrasil to restart humanity were actually Adam and Eve. And so they had to kind of turn Loki into this devil figure. And then Thor says they're part of a team, and he reminds us that Christianity is the religion that created the extreme good versus evil narrative. And then on page 156, I said, she wrote, Loki is Loki, he does what he does. And that's what she says Thor said. Loki is Loki, he does what he does. Number 4, what are your thoughts on magic? So Thor, remember, I talked about this with Freya's episode, magic is considered the woman's domain. However, Thor is a magical person. Like, there's a story in the introduction where Thor says, hey, I'm going to cook these goats that I used to pull my chariot. You can eat all the meat, but don't crack the bones and eat the marrow. And someone does that. And so when he renews these goats and turns them back into, flesh and bone goats, one of the goats walks with a limp because he cracked the bone. So he does magic. And so, like Odin, Thor uses magic, though it's considered women's work. He sees it like a tool, like many other gods. In his hands, it's a weapon. He uses his magic to revive goats after eating them. It's practical. He's pragmatic. And then question 5 was, why do you use goats to pull your carriage? So first we have Freya, who has cats. And now we have Thor, who has goats. I don't think that the Norse like horses. Well, unless you count Sleipnir, who's an 8-legged horse for Odin. They just prefer more whimsical creatures, I guess. And I said the Norse pantheon has some odd steeds. He likes how loyal and playful they are. Also, their eyes kind of creep me out personally, but that has nothing to do with what Thor said. I just wanted to say that. For number 6, she asks, why are the gods so invested in humanity? And they care about us. They want what's best for us. A lot of times we make stupid decisions. Sometimes we ignore our own gifts and focus on what others have. So, yeah. We have this issue in humanity of jealousy and covetousness, and that's very very biblical, but I feel like it's true as well. Just in general, like, people always, the grass is always greener, right? And so Thor and the other gods, see this, and they're like, but we gave you your own talents. Why are you so focused on what other people can do when you can do this, this, and this? And there's a quote on page 157. He says, why squander what's yours, wishing for what someone else has? If you were meant to wield others' skills, you would. Oh dear, I can't tell if they're playing or fighting. Could you not while I'm trying to record? Yeah, that's Chai. That's Chai. Sheesh. Okay. Number 7, she asks, how can modern people harness their power? There's another quote on page 158. When you get the strength without the responsibility, you get an overgrown and terrorizing child. And I feel like that's true of physical strength as well as, political strength, as well as even mental strength. If you don't have I'm sorry. Oh gosh. If you don't have the mental fortitude and the discipline behind the your actions, then you're selfish and you think like a child, and again, I could say a lot about politics, but I'm going to try to be good. So it also says balance physical strength. I said balance physical strength with mental and emotional strength. Number 8, she asks, how do you see yourself? And he's strong, boisterous, joyful. He's just basically like a man's man. Like, when I realized that he was the god of agriculture and, every man, I kind of had this image of Chris Hemsworth, like, yucking it up at some, like, country dive bar, was the image I got. And not in the, like, well, we'll get to that for the next question, but, like, he understands the people and he's able to connect with the people in a way that other gods are not, because he is an everyman. He kind of reflects just everyman Norse society at that time that he was, that he was worshipped originally. Number 9, how do you want others to see you? And I said, more modern media doing a disservice to the divine. He isn't all brawn and no brains. So, I love Thor. I love the Marvel movies. I think they're great. Actually, I've kind of fallen off track with them because they're kind of getting really boring, in my opinion. But, like, when Thor and, the original, like, the first group came out, I was absolutely in love with the Thor movies. I even liked the second one, Thor: The Dark World, that no one else liked, just so you know. But they portray him as this kind of really dumb himbo figure, especially, like, he's gotten, for the most part, that's how they portray him, is as this kind of little brained ding dong who's got a lot of muscles, and he's not like that. And then she asks if he has any more messages for people, and I have another quote. I say, believe in yourself. Believe in your wish for truth. You need to stop doubting yourself. When you're confident in your knowledge and skill, you'll achieve the peace you're looking for. Lion heart. Be blessed. Know your life shines ahead of you. And then she makes a poignant comparison between Loki and Thor to Michael and Lucifer. And then my overall impression was that he's a carefree individual who cares about humanity and has much to offer. Look at how much faster we got through that, man. And then we have Mary Magdalene. So, I'm sorry. My quickness is coming to an end because Mary Magdalene is super, super cool. Wait, did I say? Yeah, did I say Gabriel or did I say the Morrigan? Oh, no. Gabriel. The Morrigan and then Gabriel. Okay. Yeah, brain. Mary Magdalene, buckle in. If you are a feminist like me, this one will rile you up. And also, this one made me cry just because there's a moment between her and Jesus that just, my heart. Anyway, so, I need to get a copy of the apocryphal texts. I have read Mary Magdalene Revealed, and I will bring it up a couple times in this section. But on top of that, there are several Gospels, and they're considered non-canonical because they were slightly later than the original texts, and they're considered Gnostic Gospels. Now, I have problems with Gnosticism in some ways because the Gnostics were a group who said that the God of the Old Testament was a different God than the New Testament, and he was evil, and the New Testament God was good, and it was like making an excuse for anti-Semitism. And I'm not okay with that. But in terms of some of the other things that they thought, like, there's this big thing in witchcraft of take what resonates, leave what doesn't. You need to be able to understand, well, I agree with this, but this part to me just feels like baloney. Once you understand that, you can get a better grip of, yourself and, your own personal, you can synthesize things better. But I do need to get a copy of the apocryphal texts. Okay, this is what's going to make you mad if you're like me. So Pope Gregory IV, who died in 604 AD, conflated Saint Mary with the unnamed prostitute in the Bible in 591 to diminish her life. And this was not corrected until the 1960s. So we're talking 1,300 years of people believing that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. For no other reason than some guy said so in a sermon. And, you can say the Pope is appointed by God if you're a Catholic, which I don't know. I was not raised Catholic. I am of the belief that the Pope is a human being who can sometimes be an absolute asshole, apparently. And, excuse me, I'll have to add an explicit. I'm not going back to edit that out. A guy who was trying to diminish women's role in the church. Okay, so the Gospel of Mary Magdalene was first discovered in 1896, and it's incomplete. Now Wyvern is playing in a box. It's incomplete. It's not finished. Several sections were... So there have been several copies found, and each one of them is missing the same section. So the belief is, and I tend to agree, that there's something within that section of text that has disappeared that is like world-changing, or not even world-changing, but just something that they really, really, really did not want people to hear. So there's a quote, page 160 to 161. It's from, I think this is from the Gospel of St. Mary. And the Savior said, "There is no sin, but it is you who make sin when you do the things that are like the nature of adultery, which is called sin. That is why the good came into your midst to the essence of every nature, in order to restore it to its root." Okay, so this is Jesus talking in the Gospel of St. Mary, saying, yeah, sin doesn't exist the way you think of it. Sin is when sin as you think of it exists when you say it does, essentially, is what I get out of that. So yeah. There's a story. So since Easter is coming up, this is a perfect time for this. Why we decorate Easter eggs. Now, some people will say that we stole the religion from Ostara. I've already talked to you a little bit about why I don't think that's a fair thing to say, and also is diminishing of pagans who worshipped covertly during that time. But Ostara as a holiday did not appear in written form until the 1800s. And Christians have been coloring eggs for 1,000 years. And the reason why is because there's a story in the Bible where after Jesus was resurrected and went to heaven, Mary traveled to see the emperor in Rome, and Emperor Tiberius, I believe. And she said, Jesus rose from the grave, and he says, I would rather believe, I will believe that an eggshell can turn red before I will believe that a man came back from the dead. And while she's watching, this egg that he had on his table turned bright red. So that's the story of the egg and why we color eggs for Easter. And then there's also, she mentions Asherah. Asherah is one of the first deities I ever worshipped outside of God and Jesus. So I'm really excited that she at least mentions her. Anyway, and the first question is actually, what do you and Asherah have to do with each other? Now, Asherah is a Canaanite goddess. The story is that, or the archaeology suggests that there was a main Canaanite god named El. El had 70 sons with Asherah, one of which was YHWH, who I will call Adonai. So originally, the god that we consider God, Adonai, was originally the son of El, and El was married to Asherah. Over time, Asherah, because things weren't really written down, stories change, Asherah eventually became known as the wife of Adonai. Adonai becomes, and the thing about El and his 70 sons, each son was a god of a different place. So if you look in the Old Testament, there's actually, David, I believe it is, says, why are you making me leave Israel so I can no longer worship Adonai? So it's this concept that Adonai must be worshipped only in Israel. And that if you leave Israel, you can no longer worship him. So Asherah becomes Adonai's wife. Now, the over time, we have the prophets in the Bible who turned, and the thing is, they weren't originally monotheists. They were monolatrists. So that meant they believed in multiple gods, but they only worshipped Adonai. And sometimes his wife. And then the prophets came. This was when the Israelites were exiled to Babylon. And so, of course, they can no longer say, well, we can only worship Adonai in Israel. So the thought begins to change. And they go from monolatry to monotheism, to believing only one God exists. And during that, they start to get rid of all memory of Asherah. Now, with archaeology, we're able to find bits and pieces that relate back to her. So there are 2 books. There's When God Had a Wife and Did God Have a Wife? And I cannot remember their authors' names. I've not read Did God Have a Wife, but I have read When God Had a Wife. And there are some Gnostic bits. Again, I don't really super jive with that, but it's a pretty good book. I recommend it. Anyway, that was my spiel. So what do you and Asherah have to do with each other? And Christianity is so male-dominated. You have God and you have Christ. And then you have this kind of ephemeral idea of the Holy Spirit, right? And the Holy Spirit is supposed to be like the divine feminine. Jesus actually comes into the interview. He hugs Mary. It's so cute. They have a sweet moment. Jesus appears and says it wasn't meant to be that way. Mary says she, Mama Mary, and Asherah worked together to bring back the feminine side of the divine. Question 2. What do you feel about the church minimizing you? Oof. And Mary says she was minimized because she stood as a symbol of feminine power. They tried, but she and Mama Mary and Asherah never truly went away. And that's what I love about the gods and divinity. Mary Magdalene does not identify herself as a god. I would not identify her as a god. But she is this divine entity, and she has power, and even when, humanity bungles things up and decides, oh, no, we're going to suddenly decide this person isn't worth, talking to anymore, they're still there, and they're still trying to do good things for humanity. Okay. Number 3. Now, if you read in the Gospel of Thomas, which is another apocryphal gospel, the Gospel of Mary, and even in some of the canonical texts, they talk about how, Mary was kind of this background figure. She's called the apostle to the apostles. And she And basically, they were products of their time. They treated her as less than, taking her money because she kind of bankrolled the whole thing. That was why they were able to travel and not work. She was independently wealthy. They took her money, but they didn't treat her as worthy of Jesus's time. And it seems like their attitude has changed now that they've, crossed over to the other side. But she bankrolled the whole thing. Well, they don't talk about that in the Bible, but he got his money from somewhere. And it was from women. It was not just for Mary, but Mary was a significant part. Women bankrolled his ministry. They paid for his ministry, so he was able to travel and do things. Number 4, what do you think about hellfire and damnation rhetoric? She says, and this is something Chai and Wyvern, good gracious. She says, God isn't the type of deity to punish us for being imperfect, for not knowing him, for example. Our existence is about love. And that's something that I've thought for a long time, is just that, people say, there are a lot of people who say the Bible is the divinely inspired word of God. Nothing about it is wrong. There are no inconsistencies. But then when you actually read it, it's full of inconsistencies because it's written by dozens of people over thousands of years. There's no way it's going to continue to be consistent throughout that time. So we've got this idea that, they have to be, because the Bible is perfect, then this whole hellfire and damnation thing must be correct. But it was still people with agendas writing this stuff down. And this is gonna, if there are any straight up Christians listening, first off, what are you doing here? Second off, I'm sorry, but feel free to yell at me in the comments or whatever. I don't care. Number 5, what was it like to be an apostle? And so my first thought is hippie movements and the civil rights movement. By the way, she talks about it, and she was just kind of it happened so fast, and we were just having a good time and helping people and worshiping, and it was just this wonderful thing. And so I just had my brain just immediately went oh, hippies. I don't know why. People moving for the betterment of all, even during hardship. And I also started thinking about Jesus Christ Superstar, because I don't think I've gone a single episode without mentioning a musical. You'll have to tell me. But yeah, I grew up listening to Jesus Christ Superstar. My dad used to play it on CD in the car, every time we were riding in the car. And so I know all the words and can sing multiple different harmonies in it because I've been doing it since I was 5. So in the Bible, it says that Mary was exorcised of 7 demons. And Sarah asks, what were the demons like? And Mary Magdalene revealed, and in, Sarah's writing, it says, she basically was they were sins to herself, in essence. Her arrogance caused her issues. It wasn't so much that, she had, done these certain things, but if you read Mary Magdalene Revealed, it talks about the 7 sins. It's a really good book. I'm going to add it to my list of books to talk about on the podcast. Number 7, what was your relationship with Jesus like? I don't understand why people hate the idea of Jesus loving someone romantically. It hurts my heart. So, yeah, she talks about having this, she doesn't flat out say, oh, we were romantic or anything, but this is kind of the same thing I said with Mama Mary last week. Does it matter if he was married? And I kind of understand why it was so important to some people that he wasn't, and I think it has to do with the fact that certain groups demanded that their priests be celibate, even though that was not a thing in Judaism before. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that, and the reason why priests had to remain celibate was not because it was biblically mandated. In fact, where they get this from is Paul, where Paul says, it's better to be alone, but it's okay to get married. Like, he never says you have to be alone to be an apostle, to be a religious leader. Never says that. He does say, he specifically said it's okay to be alone. Or even preferred for him to others to be alone. But he never says you have to be alone. But the reason why is because in the early church, people were worried that the priesthood would be inherited and priests would be having children and then giving the church's wealth to their children instead of leaving it in the church. That's why. So yeah. Fun fact if you didn't know that. But yeah, so I don't understand why people think that Jesus had to be celibate to be the Son of God. What was your relationship to Jesus like? What's the quote? Okay, there's a quote on page 167. It says, "They looked precious together, the way they beamed at each other like two celestial partners in crime, two eternal companions watching over the world." And I wrote under that, gonna go cry now. And Sarah asks, "How do you see yourself?" And she's an active, she's a listening ear and a path to healing. Not much else to say about that. Number 9, how do you want to be seen? She's active. She's not passive. She's this person, and I think she was proactive in life too. Because again, you have to read the subtext, because this book was a book written entirely by men. But I believe she was more proactive than we think she was in the Bible. And she's also still learning. Like, we've got this concept from several gods and goddesses and other divine figures that they learn, they grow, they're not stagnant. We've got this concept in modern Christianity that God is unchanging. He never changes. He never can change. And that's I think it's more God can change his mind when he wants to. He's not changed by what other people think. He's changed by himself. And I feel like the gods are the same way. She asks if there are any last messages. And Mary is like, everyone, divinity and humanity alike, are learning and growing. There's a quote on page 169. The point of figures like Mama Mary, like Saint Mary Magdalene, hang on, let me go back. There's something about Asherah that I still feel I'm not ready for, but I've come to understand that she knows this, and that is almost the point of figures like Mama Mary, Saint Mary Magdalene. Asherah is there, guiding them as they guide us, and cloaking herself in the many shapes and names more palatable to modern Christians, while she guides the lost and broken women back to the power that so many different kings and popes and what have yous have tried to bury. Okay. I haven't done this yet because I'm a horrible person, but I put in my overall impression that I feel so called to work with her, and I'll see if Jesus wants a spot for her next to him on my altar. I've been a lazy human being, so I have not done that yet. Okay. All right, now we're 2/5 of the way done. We're on to the Jesus interview. Again, if you have religious trauma or things like the Holocaust may be triggering to you, I highly recommend skipping ahead to the Morrigan. But I'm going to start with 2 quotes to kind of show you where Sarah's going with this. She says, I was planning on worshiping Jesus, but, I work with Jesus, so she opened a poll and let her patrons on Patreon choose what kinds of questions to ask Jesus. And I was like, oh, it could probably be really fun. And then she was like, the quote is, "And then I saw the kinds of questions that were being asked. What does Jesus think of pagans? What does he think of the church and the way they've twisted his word? What does he think about the LGBTQ plus community? What does he think about Lucifer, the devil? Is there something he wishes his followers knew? And then this last one breaks my heart. Does he hate me? And Sarah's response to this before, she was looking up things to put out for Jesus, because she always has like this little like table for the deities that she's interviewing, and she found a verse, Matthew 23:23, and it says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, anise, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former." So essentially Jesus, that's a Jesus quote. Jesus is saying, I mean, good job for offering offerings, but you're missing the entire purpose of being someone in power. You're a hypocrite. Jesus made it very clear in his lifetime what he thought about people who neglected others and treated them horribly. So that's what I'm going to say about that. But yeah. So she asked a bunch of yes or no questions. I did not write all of these down. I would be here all week. But I wrote down a few that I liked. And these are just her yes or no questions that she answered with a pendulum. And one was, do parables have a hidden meaning? And it's basically they can if you look, or if you kind of analyze them. Like, do you get overwhelmed by the amount of followers that you have? And he says it doesn't really matter. He has his job either way. And is being saved a requirement for going to heaven? Now, this is a question because when I was a kid, we were essentially told, oh, if you're not saved, you're going to hell. Which, of course, means that places where Christianity is forbidden or not mainstream like it is in the Western world, a bunch of people are automatically going to hell. Which is not okay. It's not... Sorry, my cat. They say, oh, you're automatically going to hell if you're not saved. And so I was curious, like, what does the Bible say? Now, we've already established I don't really believe in hell in the way that they describe, modern day Christians describe it anymore. But I was curious. Again, there's this idea of reincarnation, and each life allows our soul to learn and grow. So basically he's saying no, each life you're learning something new. Stop worrying about what you're going to do, where you're going in the afterlife. Okay, now we get into the questions that he had to actually, she had to get tarot answers for. And there's a bunch, so it's going to take a bit. Okay. What do you think about the state of the Bible and world? Okay. And I said, many people use and twist Jesus' word to use it for their own gain. There's a quote on page 175. We're at the precipice of something. Something new, oh, no, that's not it. There we go. They've forever given themselves over to that void, and they scream and thrash in their pulpits with this false passion, trying to revive what warmth truth once put in their chests. Holy cow. So he's saying, and then he also talks about how, some people are preaching hatred because that's what's going to get them more money. And then there are other people who are preaching hatred because they think that they're actually trying to do the right thing. They think they're legitimately trying to save people from eternal damnation. But what Jesus says, essentially, but if they are using his words for hatred or injustice, they never knew him. And I said he's talking about people who actively try to hurt others or use his name for gain, not witches. because Sarah did, like, clarify that. Like, you're not talking about witches, right? I mean, if you're being a witch and you're using his word for the wrong reasons, like spreading hatred, spreading injustice, then there's an issue. But if you're just being a witch and, like, minding your own business, no, he's not really talking about you. Okay. Question 2. What do you think about the Bible specifically? And this will get into my whole thing about the Bible was written by man and it is fallible. Okay. The important part of Scripture is the moral, just like several other deities have said. And then there's another highlight, because I really like to highlight things. Let's see. If it's something that oppresses and abuses the innocent, it is not of God. It is not truth. It is not the word of the God who is himself the protector of the oppressed and downtrodden, destroyer of injustice. Of course, Jesus sums it up more succinctly than I in Matthew 22:36-40, where he says to love God and love one another as yourself. So it's like, truly I say unto you, love God with all your heart, and the second is the same, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the quote that she's talking about. I will tell you, I went to the YMCA, I did all sorts of Bible things. I am horrible at memorizing the Bible. That was a very poor paraphrase of that, but it works. Okay. So, oh, was that the right quote? Yeah. Number 3, what do you think about the different denominations? Here's another quote on page 177, and it is from Galatians 3:28. Which is not Jesus, it's Paul, but it is a really profound statement. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. So essentially, Jesus says we're one church that has been split in a harmful way, and that will end soon. Which makes me wonder, what does that mean, soon? Because he specifically in her like conversation with him, he says soon. I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know if I want to be joined to some of these other denominations, but I think that's kind of the point. I do think that's really the point, actually. What do you think about the LGBTQ plus community? And his quote was literally just, "They're people." He says there are problems inside and out. You can't win if you're divided. Jesus says that they need to unite if they're going to win against the people who use his word against him. Sarah is part of the LGBTQ plus community, and I'm surrounded by people who are. So I'm trying really hard not to step on toes. But essentially she's talking about the people who TERFs, or what does she specifically say? A lot came to my head with this. TERFs, bi erasure, nasty attitudes between identities. So, yeah, like, if you want to actually stand up and, like, fight for your rights, you have to do it together, essentially. Okay. Thoughts on abortion and the end of Roe v. Wade. There's another quote, because there always is. The decisions that have been made. People use my name for injustice and abuse. The relationship between me and these so-called faithful is broken. And they broke it. So he makes it very clear. He's saying fight. You don't stop working. You call on divinity. There's what? Page 177. I think I meant 179. One last quote where he says, young mothers shouldn't have to bear this. And those that choose not to be mothers, asks Sarah, and he responds, those not wanting to be shouldn't have that choice made without them. So essentially, he's saying women deserve a right to choose, which, again, if you're a Christian who is pro-birth and you're on here, I'm sorry, but I'm just going based on what I've read. And I never read anything in the Bible that says abortion is wrong. Thoughts on polytheists who still acknowledge you? I count as one of those, so this is a fun question. Several deities have acknowledged that time is a cycle, and Jesus is no different. And religions aren't eternal, but he embraces polytheists. He's basically like the more the merrier. If you want to join. Fine, like, this is a religion about love. You're welcome here, and I think that's great. 7, thoughts on the idea that you are a witch. And he's basically like, that word doesn't really encompass what I do. He's not a witch, he's divine. And he's a shepherd who leads his flock. The term witch doesn't matter to him. So he's kind of like, it just isn't what I am. I'm not. Yeah. She asks, are you the son of God or what? And this, I literally wrote, this is going to upset literally centuries worth of doctrine. It doesn't matter. Details don't matter. Jesus' teachings and how they brought people to God are what matter. Again, doesn't matter if Mary was a virgin. No. Doesn't matter if Jesus was married. No. Does this matter? No. What he did was bring people to Jesus, and that's what matters. There's another quote where he says, you know, it could have been anyone in my position. We aren't chosen or made because we're great. We're great because we're chosen. All of us, for whatever purpose we have in this world. All of us play a part. We are all important. That is wild to think about. As someone who, you know, still goes to church and does things. Like, that is wild. To think that Jesus himself is saying, it didn't have to be me. It could have been anyone. If you can tell, my throat's a little sore today. And then question 9. What do you think about your people not accepting you? Because there were Jewish people who there are still, of course, there's a whole religion outside of Christianity where they don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Most religions. But, because of that, and because of this silly notion that the Jews killed Jesus when the whole point of it being the Romans and the Jews was that it was Jew and Gentile, I could get into a very long rant here. Suffice it to say, he knew that people wouldn't accept him. But what people did in his name because of that rejection, LGBTQ+, the Roma, Jewish people, is disgusting and wrong. Jesus gives Sarah images of the gates of Auschwitz. So again, I gave you that trigger warning. This is where, like, he's saying the horrible things that were done to his people. He was Jewish. Those are his people. Was abhorrent and wrong. And the fact that there are still people now who, if you're in online spaces, either think it's edgy or cool, or maybe they actually believe this way, but they think acting like having this anti-Semitic view, or even flat out claiming they're Nazis, is just, they think it's fun, they think it's cool, they think it's no big deal, and it's disgusting. Anyway, he expects to do more than just know true Scotsmen, the people who behave that way. We have to fight to prove them wrong. Okay, so this is an Esther quote, not a quote from Jesus. But the people who, no real man would such and such. No true Christian would such and such. I hate those people. I despise those people because they're wrong. Yes, true Christians would. I literally got into this argument. I should not get into arguments on social media because it's stupid, and I know it's stupid. But I got into this argument with someone. Well, are you saying that child abusers can be Christian? And I'm like, yes. Can they be good Christians? No. But yes, they can be Christian. Sorry about it. But saying, oh, they're not truly a Christian because they do X, Y, and Z, that just diminishes the role that we need to take in fighting against that. You're othering them. You're saying, well, that's not my problem because they're not real Christians. Oh, that's not my problem because they're not real men. You're not taking... You have not necessarily a responsibility, but if you are claiming to be that category and you just sweep that under the rug, then you're not doing your due diligence. That's my 2 cents. Okay. Sarah asks if the Messiah is part of the cycle that she talked about earlier, and he confirms. There's a quote on page 184. We're all prophets now, or at least we can be, because we do have the tools to find and reach God. We're picking them up again. We're learning how to close the gap of communication and familiarity between God and humanity again. And that's essentially what a prophet was someone who talked to God, and God answers. And we have much easier ways of communication now than we did then. That's why I think the people who say tarot cards are of the devil are silly. Because they're just tools, just like candles, just like a chainsaw. They're tools. All right, 10. Thoughts on the rapture. It's become a weapon to beat people with. It's time that everything will... It's true that everything will end, but that's the nature of things. Like, it's not some big, everyone's going to be sucked up into the sky and their fillings and their clothes are going to be left on the ground and all their children are going to be freaked out and crying and scared. Things will end, but that's just the nature of things. So yeah. How does one tell between Jesus and God? Jesus has humanity that God and the angels haven't experienced. Angels can push too hard if you're not careful. Jesus acts as an intermediary. 12. What do you think about Lucifer? Lucifer is an adversary whose job it is to show how weak we are, but truthfully, as we have seen, he wants us to be better. Then page 185. This is a battle here, but it's between knowledge and ignorance. So it's not some physical, they're not going at it with swords. It's literally just, it's a battle of wits. What do you think about Asherah? Again, I've told you her story recently. We messed up. Neither God nor Jesus are happy that Asherah has been cut out, because she represents another side of something that, as a result of us cutting her off, have lost. Balance. Okay. She still works, but she's been displaced, and it was the wrong thing to do. And I totally agree with that, as someone who actually, actively worships Asherah. What do you think? What's your relationship with Saint Mary like now? And he respects what she did for the apostles, and they seem so sweet. And I just wrote relationship goals. Because, again, whether they were romantically involved or not really my point. They seem sweet. They seem like best friends, like the best of friends, like little co-conspirators. I shouldn't say little, they're divine beings, but they're co-conspirators. They work together. They've got plans together. Anyway. What were your hobbies in life? And this surprised me because, he's the adopted son, I guess you could say, of Saint Joseph. And so Joseph was a carpenter, so you would expect that Jesus was talked about as being a carpenter because, if you're, in ancient Israelite society, in most ancient societies, you basically you apprenticed to your family. And so he would have apprenticed to Joseph and become a carpenter himself. So I expected Sarah to say, oh, his hobby is carpentry. But it turns out, at least according to Sarah's cards, I'm surprised that it wasn't carpentry, but philosophical pursuits. I can't talk today. Sarah asks, what should folks do if having a hard time reaching you? And he's basically like, spend some time away. Like, get away from distractions, technology, people. Get away from whatever is grounding you to earth. Spend some time alone and give divinity your full attention. And so that way you're cutting out all the white noise, essentially. And you're giving yourself a chance to hear. And I think that's actually relevant for any deity that you're trying to contact. Because again, I'm really bad about contacting deities because I have anxiety and there's just a lot of noise in my brain. But yeah, I think that you have to be willing to like spend time away and spend time alone. And be willing to be alone with your thoughts, which is something that is very hard for people like me. So I'm working on it. How do you see yourself? He brings people together. He's a unifier. How do you want to be seen? Someone who does the right thing, even though people take his words and use them to hurt others. Which again just breaks my heart because, I can't imagine being some famous person. It doesn't have to be a literal divine being, but like just being someone who's famous. And then having your words taken out of context and used to beat other people over the head with, to the point where people are systemically abused and neglected and all sorts of other horrible things. It's not good. It's not good. How do you want to be seen? Someone who does the right thing, even though people take his words and use... Oh, I already said that. Blah. Message. Stop focusing on the details and work together for good. Again, it's not about the details. It is not about what version of communion is correct. It's not about... This is a very Christian moment. So if you're a pagan and you're listening to this and you're totally bored out of your skull, I apologize. But this is specifically, I think, for my Christian witches. The details. Again, the details don't matter. The details don't matter. There's a quote on page 189. It's a big quote. Okay. Sarah, this is all Sarah, but I think it's really time that Christians reclaim that truth. In my mind, God, His Spirit, and Jesus all represent the undying, unapologetic, and undeniable voice of justice. It isn't just that they're pure love and light like so much modern discourse makes them out to be. Of course, that's part of it. But love and light without discipline is not effective, and people shy away from the sides of God that make them uncomfortable. The sides that shut down injustice that they'd otherwise turn a blind eye to. The sides that avenge the oppressed and heal the wounded, that actively turn and smite the wounder for their transgressions. My overall thoughts, Jesus wants us to stop using his message to push people to bash people who we disagree with over the head. Okay. Next we have the Morrigan. We are on the downhill slope here. I don't think it's going to be much longer. I don't know why I tell you that. I don't know. Alright, she is a triple goddess in the true sense. Many people have been assigned that triple goddess role, but she is a true triple goddess. She has three aspects to her that I am not going to try to pronounce because I don't speak Irish and I will butcher them. There's a quote on page 191, and it has to do, I think, with the first question. The blood doesn't last in the river. It comes and goes, a tide, life and death. Okay. So the first question is, thoughts on how people perceive a triple goddess today. So in today's culture, we think of a triple goddess as like the cycle of life, specifically a female cycle of life. Child, adult, mother. So maiden, mother, crone. Child, mother, grandma, essentially. The cycle, and so it's the cycle of life, but what the Morrigan actually is a war goddess. She has 3 different aspects to her, and they're all warriors. The concept of the modern triple goddess came from the view of Christianity and wanted to make it good to avoid the more, quote, evil war and death. There's another quote on page 192, and it says, "This world, you cannot chase light all the time. There is growth in darkness, life's cradle rocked in death. It's folly to erase what is considered dark. People miss the full cycle of life this way. You have to take the good with the bad. You have to take the bad. It's just part of life. You have to take the bad." Okay. How do you oversee the battlefield as 3 sisters? They separate to instill courage and rage into the victors. Like, they already know who the winner's going to be. They're basically like the cheer squad, but like a really bloody, dark cheer squad, I guess. What interests you the most about humanity? We know more than we think we do, and we avoid what makes us uncomfortable. There's another quote on page 193. People don't learn because they can't learn what they already know. Chaos comes from trying to deny obvious truths. So she's specifically, I think, talking about death here. Like, we try to avoid death. It makes us uncomfortable. We get scared. But it's part of life, and we have to accept that. How are fairies different from angels and demons? And they aren't necessarily... So, angels and demons kind of have, like, they're more divine. Like, they have interest in humanity, and the Fae really don't, at least from what I've read. Like, they aren't necessarily there for human growth so much as to enjoy their own lives. They won't give you a path specifically to follow, but they will help you find options. And then she asks, how would you recommend people work with fairies? And my biggest thing, I think most of us know this at this point, they're not Tinkerbell. They're tricky. They want things for themselves. The Fae are people and deserve respect. Meet them where they are. Okay. What does it mean for gods to die? Death returns gods to their seat of power on the other side. So if you read the Mabinogion, it talks about gods dying and essentially doing just that. At least the version that I've read. But mine was like a fictionalized version. I need to read the real deal. But at least from what I read, there is that cycle of they go back, they learn, they grow, and then they come back here. Page 195 says... knowledge is our wealth. Death is a tool. It isn't the end of or a tragedy. It's a doorway. We carry things in and out of it as needed. So yeah, again, it's this concept of death as like a transition period. Which, if you see the death card in tarot, it's the same way. Like, death does not mean the end, goodbye. It means transformation. It means growth in a new direction. And then she compares, makes comparisons to Jesus' death and Ragnarok. Like, when Jesus died, he stayed in the ground for 3 days, then came back in his more divine form. Ragnarok is a transformation. She asks, what inspires you to work with practitioners? And the Morrigan says, they work with the winner. They know who it will be before the, quote, battle even starts. And it does not have to be a physical battle. It could be a mental battle. It could be a battle of minds. It could be a battle of wits. But again, it is that it's a battle. And she knows who the winner is going to be before you even start. She asks, how do you see yourself? She saw that the battlefield changed from a physical one to a mental one, and she adapted. So she's very good at changing when needed to, adapting. How do you want to be seen? One cannot see her without seeing her 3 sides. She's willing to make hard decisions. So you have to view her as all three goddesses. She's not just one person. She is three in one. Kind of like the Christian version of the Trinity. 3 in 1. And when it's... when it's talking about hard decisions, it's like the victor, hard decisions when it comes to life and death. She had any last messages? You can't heal without some pain, but it's better to heal than let it fester. And I agree with that 100%. Then there's another quote. I said, Sarah has a thought on page 198. Oh, and it's kind of it's a big thought. And I kind of forgot to do an overall impression. So let me do the overall impression first. I feel like we have this kind of like some people. I've seen plenty of people who recognize her as the triple goddess in her war aspect, but there are some people who only see like they want to see the love and light kind of side of things, which is fair in some respects, but like she's powerful, and she determines the winners in war. Like she isn't some light and airy fairy lady. She's tough. Okay, but for Sarah's thought, what if Jesus didn't die to save us, but as a way for God to show solidarity with us and our suffering? So, there's another book that Sarah has read, and it's called Omnipotence versus Omnipotence. And it's all about the fact that, like, maybe God isn't so much as omnipotent as we were led to believe, and so it's all-knowing versus all-loving. And I think omnipotence fits better anyway. But yeah. Okay, I don't know why I closed this, because I still have one more interview to do. Okay. Our last interview is Archangel Gabriel. So last time, I kept writing Gabriel for Raphael, but this time I actually wrote Gabriel for Gabriel. Alright, Gabriel means strength of God. And he's kind of the messenger. He's the guy who talks to Mary and Joseph when Mary becomes pregnant with Jesus. Gabriel, so he's kind of like a go-between. And he's a creative entity. He, especially with intuition and emotions, which intuition is a strong thing for me because my anxiety makes it so hard to trust my intuition. Because my anxiety is like, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Why does God send you to prophets and other folks? And Gabriel gives us the missing piece of the puzzle, a hint that grows into thoughts. So he's kind of he's pushing people in the right direction. Wyvern sees the ribbon on my, he's sitting in my lap and he sees the ribbon on my book and he wants to play. So yeah, he's just kind of, he's the nudger, I guess. Do you prefer to be seen as any specific gender? And he doesn't care. Like, sometimes people portray him as a woman. He doesn't care. There's a quote on page 201. Maybe if I can turn the page. And in heaven, according to Jesus, we too will be like angels if we remember Matthew 22:30. We won't be defined by the gender we rolled around by in life unless for whatever reason, have some deeply rooted attachment to the performance we call gender in this life. Okay. So gender doesn't really exist in heaven. So the Christians who are, you can't be a woman and be a man, just crack me up, because gender really does not matter in the grand scheme of things. Wyvern, do not eat this ribbon. Thank you. What do you help with besides writing and messages? And Gabriel helps people find ways to communicate more clearly. And that's something else I need, especially with this podcast. Maybe we should talk to Gabriel about being the patron angel for this podcast. What would happen if someone denied God's requests? They do. We only hear about the ones who say yes. Like, can you imagine a history book? And it's all about the people who did nothing. They didn't join any wars. They didn't make any major accomplishments. They just kind of lived their lives and moved on. Like, that would essentially be what the Bible is if we talked about all the people who said no. And Mama Mary actually basically implies that, like, she was given a choice whether or not she wanted to be the mother of God. And she chose to do it, but it was a choice. And then there's another quote on page 203. Most people think they aren't worthy of what I tell them they're going to do. Some just need time and a little more convincing, and other people want nothing to do with it. Oh well. It means moving on to another person. That's it. What do you think about mainstream Christianity? So there's a list on page 203. The way of our Father is a beautiful thing. When followed, his laws bring all the things in that first card there, which is the King of Cups. Abundance, generosity, security, reliability, tolerance, all that. That's what any religion that follows him should be. And Christianity does seem to be getting back on track with that slowly, but there's a lot of, greed for abundance and generosity, security, reliability. It depends on the church. Tolerance, definitely not in a lot of churches. Wyvern, you are so cute. But yeah, so we're getting there, especially certain denominations, but others seem to be trying to move even further away. What do you think about Christian witches? He's basically just saying make sure you use magic for the right reasons, not just because you want power, but because you want to gain knowledge and study. And also because maybe you want to help people or grow, but not just because you want to be the most powerful person in your whatever. What should people look out for when you come by? And he gives specific signs. I won't go into them. If you have the book, you'll find them. But I just appreciate that he gave specific signs, because Jesus, when he was asked, do you have any specific cards or signs? He's just like, whatever you associate with me is fine. And I'm like, Aww. How do you see yourself? He has to watch us when we make mistakes or doubt ourselves, and he finds it hard to watch because, again, angels have this kind of like perfect knowledge. They're incredibly smart and logical, and so seeing us make dumb decisions is hard. Like, I imagine it's kind of like an older brother watching a younger brother making silly mistakes. How do you want to be seen? And he signals change. And there's another quote on page 205. And he says, I am the herald. Things don't last forever. I am the one who blares the trumpet of change as things end. I am the one who first tells of the coming upheavals. I am a menace for those in power. I come to break the power structures men cling to, so new ones can be attempted. God is the catalyst. I am the forecaster. And then any last messages? I think he's spot on that we get in our own way. We have to believe in whatever higher power we ascribe to. We have magic, but it's meant to help us grow as people, not to flaunt. And then my overall impression is I just want to work with him, especially on intuition and things. I didn't have much to say about that. So I apologize if this particular episode is kind of a mess. I'm really tired. Spring break has been great, but things are happening and I'm not happening with them. So let me grab my cards. So next week we will do King Paimon through Belial, I think. I literally wrote it down. Let me look. Paimon through... Yeah, King Paimon through King Belial. Included in that one will be Judas Iscariot. I've already finished reading the entire book. I will say Judas is a surprise of an interview. It was not what I expected at all when I started reading it because, yeah. I won't spoil anything. It's really good, though. Wyvern. Let's see. What? Oop, there we go. There's a card. And it is the Four of Cups. Let's see what's going on for us this week. Oh, Five of Cups. I can't read. Okay. Disillusionment, loss, feelings of failure, regrets, and wishing you could turn back the clock. This card is about acceptance of what has happened and who and what you are now. There is no point in wistful thinking about what might have been. This card reminds us that we live in a dualistic reality. For each bad thing that has happened, there is an equal and opposite good thing about it too. Thus, look now at what has been gained instead of lost. Each of us must endeavor to see beyond the surface detail of life, to see that in fact everything is part of a unity, like yin and yang. So, you might be feeling nostalgic this week, or something has happened and you're regretting that it happened, or you're just having a rough time with feeling disillusioned about, family relationships or the government, or, what have you. But, I think what this card is saying, that you look for the silver lining. It might be a rough week, but things will get better. And you have to remember that, good things happen and will continue to happen despite what you're going through right now. All right. As always, you can find me on social media. I am on Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok, A Witch's Yarn. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach me there, or on my email, which is awitchesyarn@gmail.com. If you please feel free to reach out. Again, next week we will be reading from King Paimon to King Belial. Thanks. Have a great week, and don't explode.